Good evening all and welcome. If you enjoy these and would like more, don't forget to subscribe and press the bell icon for even more stories. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. Mum and I had a really long day of running errands, and we were heading home for the evening. We discussed stopping at our local convenience store for gas and drink, but the closer we got to the convenience store, we both agreed that maybe it was just best we go home and crash, so we did that. I even remember my mum saying exactly, "We can just get the gas in the morning." Well, little did either of us know that was probably the best decision we ever made. The next morning we got up and sat in the living room to watch TV. The news opens with a story of how 3 teens robbed, shot and killed a convenience store clerk and severely wounding a customer. The convenience store? The very same one Mum and I had been planning to stop at on our way home, 5 to 10 minutes before the robbery and shooting happened. Mum and I were shaken beyond belief. I've absolutely no doubt that had we stopped there, neither of us would have lived to tell the tale. I lost my mum in January of 2019, but I'm grateful every day that it wasn't 21 years earlier. This is a true and real experience that happened when I was delivering newspapers early one winter morning. It was around 4 a.m. and freezing. I was out on my usual paper route delivering newspapers. The whole neighborhood was still shrouded in complete darkness. The bitter winter winds were blowing strong. I was approaching an apartment block with my papers, and as I was heading to a dark corner of the building, I heard a voice. It sounded like people were talking. What the hell were people doing at this odd hour out in the cold? I wondered as I squinted my eyes in order to get a better look. As I drew closer, I saw there was a woman doubled over and crouching in the hallway before me. Instantly, I knew something was wrong. As I got closer, I noticed that all the woman was wearing was her underwear. Why? Why was she out here in the freezing midwinter morning alone with no clothes on? She was shivering. I went over to her and asked her what had happened, if she was okay, and if she needed any help, but she wouldn't reply to me. I couldn't stand to see her like that. Before long, she would freeze. Her lips were already going blue. I took off my coat and tried to put it around the woman, and she pleaded with me not to give her the coat and tried to push it off. She muttered something about if her husband saw her with the coat, she'd be in trouble. At that moment, I knew I had to do something. I suspected domestic violence, so I called the police, and while I waited for the cops to arrive, I waited by the woman by her front door. She still wouldn't say a word. I don't know how long she had been out there. It was truly sad and a haunting sight to see that woman alone, in her underwear, on a dark, cold winter morning. While we were waiting for the police, her front door burst open, her husband rushing out. He started shouting at her. She cowered as he threw a punch at her. I obviously intervened, and thankfully I was strong enough to protect the woman until police arrived. The woman broke down and told police that this wasn't the first time he had forced her out into the cold in just her underwear. So it seemed like this kind of thing was happening all the time, which made me sick to my stomach. I've always tried to see the best in people, but this incident rocked my confidence in human beings. I mean, to throw your half-naked wife out into the cold. Humans are terrifying. When my brother and I were younger, our parents took us on an unforgettable trip to a theme park. The theme park has since closed down, and I think incidents like the one I'm about to describe are most likely responsible for its shutdown. I was around 8 or 9, and my brother was around 4 or 5 when this happened. It was summer vacation, and our parents promised us that if we were good during the summer break, then before we would go back to school, they would take us to an amusement park. After many boring days and nights of good behavior, our promise was delivered. We all bundled into the car and headed for the amusement park. It wasn't Disney World or Fuji Q Highlands. It was a bit on the cheaper side and a bit more old school. I think the park was established in the 60s, so it was the kind of park that still had haunting clown murals everywhere and the creepy robotic animatronics. Those 2 titans of terror would be enough these days to put me off wanting to go, but back in the 80s, these creepy clowns and glitchy animatronics were socially acceptable. I guess we had come all the way anyway. We finally get to the park, a little later than my parents had hoped. There was the usual bickering on the car ride that had been intensified due to a flat tire and bad directions. I guess we got there around 7, and the park was set to close at 9. We would have all of the next day to go to the park, but we were so eager to see something before we went to bed. We were staying in the park hotel, so we dumped our bags in the room and then headed down to the park as a family. When we were in there, it was the usual kind of thing. Ferris wheels, roller coasters, bumper cars. Our parents pitched up a picnic table and got themselves a few drinks to let us roam the small park together. We went on this Ferris wheel, and that was great, if not a little creaky. It gave us an aerial view of the park. There was a clown show kind of area, and one of the clowns was waving to us. We waved back, of course. Then the clown started making his way over to the Ferris wheel as we descended. He greeted us as we got to the bottom. It was great, we felt so special. He had a big old red diamond painted over his eyes, a blue nose and mad yellow hair. His white clown face paint glowed, and as the sun was beginning to set, he asked, "Hi kids, are you enjoying the park?" "Yeah, we are," we replied. He made some small talk with us, and then asked us to play the honesty game, and that if we answered all the questions honestly, we would get a prize. "What's your favorite color? Are your parents here? Do you like soccer, kids? Are you staying at the park hotel? What's your favorite ride? What room number are you staying in? Do you like maths or science the least?" Since we were young, we answered all his questions honestly, and he was true to his word. He said he would come and deliver a special ticket to our hotel room later, and that the ticket would allow us to go on a special ride with him. But if we told anyone about the ticket, we wouldn't be allowed on. We could barely contain our excitement. We agreed, and he said he would go let our parents know. Looking back on that now, we missed several red flags. I mean, remembering this is quite traumatic. After an hour or so, the park put a message over the speaker system saying it would be closing shortly. Our parents rounded us up, and we had our dinner and went back to the room. We whispered to each other about our special ticket coming later, giddy with excitement. Our parents said they were heading downstairs to the hotel bar, and they put a movie on for us and told us to stay in bed and keep the door locked. We couldn't focus on the movie. We sat on our bed staring at the door, waiting for the clown to come and collect us for our special ride. After about 20 minutes of our parents leaving, we heard a knock at the door. I pushed a chair up to the door to look at the people to see who it was. I saw a man out there. I was so disappointed that it wasn't the clown, I quietly climbed back down from the chair and told my brother. The man outside knocked the door again, but we ignored it. Then he spoke. "Kids, don't you want to ride the super secret ride?" It was the clown's voice, but when I looked out the peephole a few minutes ago, it was just a man. I thought something wasn't right. "Hurry, kids, you'll miss your chance." My brother began to put his shoes on, and I grabbed his arm. This was wrong. I didn't like this. I called back, "No." It was all I had. I just instinctively knew that the door should remain shut. He wasn't the clown anymore. "Open the door," he said, dropping his clown voice. My brother began to whimper. I said nothing. "Open the door now, or you'll be in so much trouble." My brother pulled on my sleeve and ushered me towards the bathroom. I then heard the man fiddling with the lock, knocking and muttering. His voice was getting angrier. We locked ourselves in the bathroom. He hammered on the door, he was shouting, and then the room fell silent. About 10 minutes passed and we heard the door open. Silent tears were rolling down my brother's face and mine, as I held his hands over his mouth to muffle his screams. "Where are they?" I heard my mom call, and relief washed over us. We told our parents about what happened, and they thought we had just watched a scary film or had a bad dream. We couldn't convince them of the fact that we just had a near miss. Years later, the park was shut down. I hope to God nothing bad happened to anyone else, and it just went out of business. The other day, I ran into a former university friend in Shinjuku. He said he was about to head into Shibuya to do a little shopping. We always hung out and helped one another at university, so I was really happy to see him, and I invited him to have coffee with me in the station. It was great. We were talking about old times and laughing loads. It was such a great chance meeting, and a real pick-me-up to the bad week I'd been having. Amidst the jokes and nostalgia, my friend Ash paused and looked out of the window and said, "Don't you ever feel scared?" "Scared?" I asked. On average in Japan, there are 1,000 murder cases each year. The current population of Japan sitting at 1.2 million. Therefore, for every 100,000 citizens there are, one of them must be a murderer. By this logic, we can safely assume that there could be 7 murders in this station each day. I wonder how many we have brushed shoulders with today, how many we sat next to, how many stared our way, studying us with their eyes. I was taken aback. This wasn't exactly fitting with our conversation. I had to take a moment to do the mental maths in my head, while also trying to figure out the reason for this gear change. Trying to keep the conversation light, I replied, don't worry about it. If you consider that some of those 1,000 killers a year are arrested, and some are so far away they probably wouldn't even be 500 miles from the station. I'm sure there aren't 7 murderers here now. Yeah, but I'm sure there's one here now. With that reply, he looked directly at me. His cold eyes focused on mine. They were unmoving. I gasped. Was he trying to tell me something? Was he trying to tell me that he was one of those 7 murderers he hypothesized? I remember, to thinking back, something had happened when we were at school together. We weren't friends until university, but I did know him from school. You see, there was a park on a really tall hill near our school. It was such a pain to climb up, but us kids loved going there after school. I remember there were rumors that Ash had a girlfriend he had gotten pregnant. A friend of ours told me that Ash was worried by the responsibilities of having a child at such a young age. So he did something. Maybe it wasn't a conscious choice. Maybe it wasn't even intentional. Maybe it didn't even happen this way. But rumor has it, Ash pushed her down those steps leading into the park. The fact is, a girl from our school fell down 50 stone steps and struck her head multiple times. Another fact is that the park incident was dealt with as an accident by the authorities. The final fact was that there were only 2 people in that park, no witnesses, and no further questions were asked. As this memory or rumor flashed back to me, I started to feel quite sick. "It's about time I was heading off," I said. "Well, let's head off together," he replied. We left the cafe and headed back towards the station. Even after rush hour, Shinjuku Station is always so busy. As we walked and weaved through the massive commuters, and if Ash was to be believed, the would-be killer spoke. Going back to our chat earlier in the cafe, one interesting theory to consider is that 1 in 25 psychopaths are capable of committing crimes that they will get away with. They elude their punishment, you see. If we were to put into theory with the maths I explained earlier, perhaps as many as 7,000 people capable of murder pass through this station each day. I laughed at this and said, "I guess the streets are filled with the would-be serial killers then. This station must be a real danger zone." "Well, perhaps you happen to pass one by on the street here today. Then, this is my train. See you," Ash said, and as I turned to say goodbye properly, he had already disappeared into the bustling crowd of people. I thought he was heading for Shinjuku. I guess he changed his mind. I ran up the stairs to catch my train as it was pulling in. I was in a crowd racing for the train, as I heard the music playing to indicate the departure was imminent. I would make it though. I was now at the top of the stone stairs of the station. I felt an arm around my neck, gripped tight, and a familiar voice mutter into my ear. I can still remember the faint smell of coffee and Ash's hot breath in my ear. I told you to be careful. I told you there was a killer in the station today. Shortly after this, I felt a hard, painful shove in my sternum, and after that I have a brief memory of falling backwards, skittering through the crowd down the steps. Faces looked shocked, but one smiling as I fell. Ash. I never want to see him again. My hobby is mountain hiking. The kind of mountains I like to hike are the ones with no roads, no other people, and where wild vegetables grow. Off the beaten track hiking. Sometimes on these hikes I come across strange or unusual things. For example, I once saw an albino antelope, and on another occasion I saw an eagle the size of a fully grown man. However, the weirdest incident was the time I came across a family impossibly far into the mountains. It was a weekday afternoon. I was hiking along the prefectural border between Miyagi and Yamagata and Akita. There was a forest of huge beech trees, which made it quite easy to walk as it got dark. This is a place that not an everyday person would hike. Only local people to this mountain range would probably know about it, or people like me who enjoy hiking and have GPS. It was secluded. As I was walking along a small ridge, I noticed a small stream flowing below. At the edge of the stream, I saw a man standing there. I first thought, he must be doing a spot of fishing. But then I noticed that he wasn't alone. 4 other people stood with him. They were all standing in the river. I couldn't see clearly because they must have been at least 100 meters away, but I was sure there were 4 people stood in the river. 2 appeared to be children. I don't know why, but I thought they may be on the verge of ending their own lives together. I mean, to come all the way out here, into this secluded mountain river alone so close to dark. If that were the case, I planned to intervene and tried to talk them out of it. I hope that wasn't the case, of course, but either way, I was interested in finding out what was going on, so I used my binoculars to take a closer look. Just as I thought, there were 4 people facing away from me, 2 children and 2 adults. I watched for a moment, waiting for them to turn my way so that I could catch a glimpse of their faces. But they didn't move at all. I must have been watching them for 5 minutes and they didn't move. Then it dawned on me. They're mannequins. Someone must have put them here as a prank or a trap. I decided to go for a closer look since my first thought was to check on the family anyway. I quietly crept closer. I didn't want to be noticed. In my mind, I was planning my escape route. Jumping into the river itself crossed my mind if something terrible were to happen. As I drew closer, my predictions came true. There were 4 mannequins before me, 2 adults and 2 children, all dressed up, out here in the middle of nowhere. I was disgusted. My body shivered. I couldn't logically think why they were here. I thought to myself, someone did this. They must be absolutely not right in the head. I was now close enough to see the details on the mannequin. Each one had a name painted on its front. Every mannequin was peppered with small holes, like bullet holes, like a shotgun bullet trail. The piece de résistance was a broken box cutter blade sticking out of one of the child mannequins' backs. That was enough for me. I was terrified, and I began to make my way back down the mountain. Even as I write this now, I'm shivering. Those creepy mannequin dolls, with marks all up and down them. Someone carried them all the way there to do what and why? They're not like mannequins either. They were bulky, heavy wooden ones. If I had to carry one myself, I'd have to stop for a while to take rest, and that was just one. But there were 4 of them. It would take forever to get them there. This happened around 2 years ago, and I haven't gone back to check if they're still there. But my guess is that they probably are. When I was at university, I had a good friend who was a really good-looking person, but she never had a boyfriend or showed any interest in men. I was very curious about this, so I asked her the reason why I never saw her with a boyfriend. She said there are 2 reasons. She told me that she had a boyfriend in high school who became obsessed with her. When she couldn't take it any longer, she spoke to him about mutually ending the relationship. He exploded with rage and attacked her. The second was before university she commuted to school on the train. One day she found something in a bag, a mysterious sealed envelope. She guessed that someone slipped it into her bag on board the crowded train. The letter was very simple, and it only had a few words. Love at first sight. It was a creepy kind of love letter. It wasn't addressed to her. It didn't have her name written on the envelope. It just really creeped her out. Thereafter, she found a new letter in her bag each week. She said she did nothing to encourage them, and since this freaked her out, she decided to stop traveling to school via the train. A few days after she did this, she began to receive phone calls from a number she didn't recognize. Oh God, she thought, this is freaky. She didn't answer the call but saved the number as Stalker ? A few days passed and she set up an answer phone service to see if the stalker would leave a message, and she was surprised to find out they did. Her hands were shaking as she played the first message. Why did you go away? Why did you leave me? She said that she began to develop a fear of leaving the house, and then a fear of men. It took her years to recover from the fear instilled from not only her ex-boyfriend, but the train stalker as well. Once she had her confidence back, she attended university. I wanted to help her get a sense of trust in men again, as there are so many good men out there. I knew that I was meddling, but I wanted to help, so I thought I would invite her to a party with male and females attending, and I floated the idea to her, and she reluctantly agreed. The day of the party arrived, and I invited some of my best friends, male and female. I warned them all that my friend was nervous and asked them to be on their best behavior. My friends understood and promised to make the atmosphere great for the party. The party was held by our college mentor. I was proud of her. She spoke to a man for the first time in a long time. They had a lengthy conversation and it was really good to see. The guy she spoke to had the exact same taste in music and movies as she, to the point where they had the same favorite song. They even came from the same area. They could have talked all night, they had so much in common. I felt like it was fate that brought these two together. When the party was over, he asked her for her contact information, and I knew this would be a big step for her and I could tell she was happy with this, but she was too shy to show it. She said to me after the party on their way home, "I'm so happy, I can fall in love like anyone else now," and I was so happy for her. I just felt as excited as she did. A few days later, she received an email from him. She was pleased, as you can imagine, and I respected him for taking things slowly. After about a week of emailing, she came running into my room to tell me that he had invited her on a date. The day of the date rolled by. My friend didn't want to be late, so she left her home with plenty of time. He sent her an email stating, "I'll be there shortly, and I'll let you know when I arrive." My friend decided to wait at a cafe for him. The cafe was crowded, so she emailed him her number and asked him to call her when he got there. About 15 minutes passed and the phone rang. It's him, she thought. And then she pulled out her phone. On the screen, the name Stalker ? Was displayed. Her heartbeat rose. Old, familiar thoughts of fear crept forward from the back of her mind. She calmed herself and told herself, "I'm okay. My boyfriend is coming. I'll be safe." She decided to be brave and answer the phone. "Hello?" she said. "Hi, I'm here. Where are you?" It was the voice of the man she had met at the party. Her new boyfriend. There was no mistake. He must have been the one who put the letters in her bag on the train. She called me as she was leaving and all she said was, "I have no luck with men." She escaped the letter stalker with the help of her friends and colleagues. I don't know what they did, but they made him back off. I am shocked and somewhat in awe at the stalker's fascination and persistence with my friend. I wish he'd have just left her alone. There is a huge park near my house. On weekends and public holidays it gets really busy. However, at night the atmosphere of the park is entirely different. Back when I had just moved to the area, I was unpacking. I had so much to do and there wasn't an end in sight, so I decided to go to the park for a change of pace. The park had swings and slides, plenty of stuff. Next to a public toilet there was a phone booth illuminated in the darkness, and it crept me out a bit. Later, when I had finally finished unpacking, it was around 1 a.m, and I decided to go to a convenience store. The whole time I was walking, I felt as if someone was watching me. I didn't want to look over my shoulder at any point. There was the phone booth. Ordinarily, I would walk past it without paying it much attention, but for some reason I stopped and stared blankly at it. After a few minutes, I snapped out of it and ran to the convenience store. I bought a few things, sweets, a bento box, and was on my way home. Halfway through the park, I realized I was in desperate need of the toilet. It was unavoidable. I had to use the toilet at the park. At that time of night, I was the only one in the park. It was very frightening, and as I was washing my hands, I heard a phone ring. I checked, but it wasn't my mobile phone. It was coming from somewhere very close to the toilet, though. The payphone was ringing. What perfect timing. 2 thoughts entered my mind. The first, curiosity. What if I answered it? The second, fear. Do not answer it. In the end, fear won. I ran back to the house while the phone rang behind me. Back home, I sat down on my sofa and tried to organize my thoughts. I was still thinking about the phone booth. From my window, I could see the park and the phone booth, and I wasn't sure if it was still ringing. I watched it for a few moments as a man appeared from the nearby toilet. The light of the toilet illuminated him. In his right hand, he was holding a mobile phone. In his left, something sharp, like a tool or a knife. It only took 2 minutes to run back to my house from the park. I was just there. I thought there was no one else in the toilet with me. My suspicion was that the man was waiting in one of the toilet stalls and dialed the payphone number and would creep up to whoever answered the phone from behind and murder them. What if my curiosity were greater than my fear? Whenever I think about what could have happened, I shudder. This happened when I was in high school. It was summer vacation, and 4 of my male friends and 1 female decided we should go check out a haunted abandoned villa. It was in the middle of the woods. We didn't want to get caught going in there, so we went when it was dark, just past 11 p.m. We were fearless back in those days. None of us knew the first thing about hauntings or ghosts. We just stood outside trying to figure out how to go about it. I suggested we split up into 2 small teams, but the others were too nervous to be separated. The villa had 3 floors, and 1 appeared to be underground. We decided to start from the top and work our way down to the basement. We assembled a line. I brought the biggest flashlight out of the group, so I was voted to be up front. We went in the villa. I cannot say the atmosphere was odd, or that it was especially spooky in there, but what freaked me out was the fact that we were constantly moving further and further from the exit. A feeling of anxiety, like there was no escape, overcame us. We went down the corridor from the lobby, and my friends were whipping doors open and shining flashlights in the room. We didn't see anything of interest, and nothing scary happened. Some of the rooms were locked. Don't know why though. It was creepy imagining what might be on the other side. We had no idea how long the villa had been abandoned. The building was pretty sound, except from the odd squeaky floorboard and broken window. Some debris in the corridor too. When you're in an abandoned house in the woods, all the sounds you make sound very loud. The crunch of broken glass, etc., was magnified. I was worried about us getting spotted or caught. As we began to ascend to the 2nd floor, the girl in our group paused and said something. "Is this blood?" She found some sort of dark mark on the wall. Just as she said that, my torchlight fell on a small round ball on the ground. There were lots of them. I realized there were BB or airgun pellets. It was freaking us out a bit. Our friend was sure that she was looking at blood, so she stepped back and bumped into something. Something dropped from the ceiling, narrowly missing her. The sound of a metallic object impacting on the ground ran through the villa. We thought that there was some kind of booby trap. Who would set it up and why? What goes on here, we asked each other. She was so freaked out by what happened, she didn't want to go any further. Her boyfriend, who was with us, took her back to the car, which just left the 3 of us. We wanted to make our way to the basement. Somehow knowing that people have been here made us feel a little more confident. While we were on the basement floor, we made sure to check all the rooms. These were different rooms. Weird windowless rooms where the walls were all painted black. We didn't like the vibe down there at all. I could tell the others wanted to get back upstairs as much as I did, but we'd come this far. We had to see everything. We approached one door at the end of the corridor. There was a sign on the door that read, "Boiler Room." Beneath the sign there were some words scratched which chilled me to the bone. "Don't open the door. The children will get out." We ran for it, but before we did I swear I heard something move behind the door. Even if it was a prank by the people who hang out there, even if it was nothing at all, in that moment, something deep down inside me told me to get the hell out of that place. I'm sure it was a prank. I mean, it had to be. Right? Not too long ago, I went for a drive with some of my friends. We were driving around until late. It was pretty foggy that night. It was pretty foggy out too. It tends to be foggier in the mountains, and that's where we were. We wanted to go to the observatory area near the top of the mountain. I can't remember why we wanted to go. I realized that a jeep had started following us. It was coming up behind us really fast. One of my friends in the back pointed this out and requested in some colorful language for me to speed up. I, of course, was only happy to oblige. It was a Mercedes-Benz G-Class, which is one that basically looks like a jeep. This thing was way more suited to the mountain roads than our little car. It was really stressful with that behind me and closing the gap with every second, plus the fog, plus my friends freaking out in the back. Luckily, I spotted the turn for the observatory. I would soon be out the road for that thing to pass if that was indeed why it was tailing me. I turned in hoping the Benz would keep going straight, but it didn't. I pulled in and blocked the exit. I knew that whatever was going to come next wasn't going to be good. I sat in the driver's seat with sweat running down my forehead, telling my friends to keep calm and lock the doors. Agonizing seconds turned into minutes, then a couple of figures emerged from the Benz. We sat there, muttering to one another, pretending to be less frightened than we were. Finally, the two men approached us. They were wearing crisp and clean suits and looked really professional. A slender man who wore glasses rapped on the driver's side window, and I lowered it about 10 centimeters. "What are you doing out here this time of night?" "We're just thinking of checking out the night view here." His friend, who looked in really great shape, snorted at this. "Bunch of guys coming out here at this hour to look at the view on a foggy night, huh?" These guys looked like they were part of the Yakuza. "You know why we followed you, right?" I shook my head. "Come on, you guys driving around here ain't up to no good, no doubt. We thought you might be one of us. Don't worry, you boys are right. This is just a misunderstanding." There was a collective sigh of relief resonating in the car. We were at ease. We actually had a few cans of coffee from the vending machine together and had a chat and a smoke. We knew these guys 100% were Yakuza at this point. After a while, the guy with glasses said, "We better get going. We got something we gotta do." They were perfectly nice guys. They got back into their car, and I expected them to pull away, but they didn't. Their car just stayed, blocking the exit. We were starting to get nervous again, but then after about 3 or 4 minutes, their engines started up and they disappeared from sight, going up the road into the mountains rather than back the way we came. I don't know if they were doing anything in the mountains, but that's not my business. There wasn't anything going on, and I was just glad to be leaving. Now that we were pretty sure we weren't about to have any conflict with the Yakuza, we began to laugh about the situation and tell one another how scared we were. Well, nearly all of us were laughing. One of my friends remained quiet, and his face was pale. It was as if he'd seen a ghost. I noticed this and asked him directly if he was okay. His reply shocked me. "I saw something." I pressed him to go on. The car was silent. When the big guy opened the back seat door, I got a glimpse of inside the Jeep. There was a guy with tape over his mouth and his arms behind his back. They were up to something. I know for a fact it's nothing but empty forest land up in those mountains. None of us wanted to say what we thought was going to happen to that man, but I guess we were all thinking the same thing. I called the police, but without a license plate, I couldn't give them much to go on. I really don't know why my friend didn't memorize it if he saw the man in distress in the back seat. "Be careful," on mountain roads late at night, guys. I'll start off by saying that high school was the beginning of the years of horrible bullying and mental and emotional abuse from people who were supposedly my friends. I was short, chubby, homely, and apparently very socially awkward. I had high hopes that going off to university and leaving those people behind would be the end of it. But I could not have been more wrong. My tormentors from high school were mean, but the people I lived with on my residence floor were downright hostile and cruel. Everything I was bullied about in high school were things they hated me even worse for. Needless to say, I was beaten down to a pulp, spineless, self-hating, and traumatized. The summer between first and second year ended up being life-changing. I dropped a bunch of weight, grew into my looks a bit more, and learned how to do makeup and dress nicely, and greatly improved my social skills. I went back the next year, an entirely different person. Suddenly, I wasn't picked on anymore, and for the first time in my life, boys were noticing me, and I was actually getting a little popular. Over the next 2 years, I continued on this upward trend, and by the time summer hit before my final year, I was the happiest and most confident I had ever been. However, that did not erase the years of trauma and abuse that had so badly damaged my psyche. Despite finally being in a good place, inside I was still a beaten down, spineless little girl who never stood up for herself and let people push her into doing things she didn't want to because she felt like she had to. And this is where our story begins. One night my friend Jaina invited me out to a bar with her friend Glenn a Saturday night. Why not? I hopped on a bus and told her I was on my way. When I got to the bar, Jaina waved me over to her table where she was sitting with this massive, hulking guy. Not like a bodybuilder, but kind of reminiscent of Hodor from Game of Thrones. "Alice, this is Glenn." We exchanged our pleasantries and proceeded with no longer being sober. As the night wore on, it was pretty obvious that Glenn was interested in me. He kept smiling at me flirtatiously, giving me the look up and down, and he really liked that I was into things like video games, movies, and comic books. I guess he wasn't doing anything overtly aggressive or creepy, but something about him gave me a bad vibe that said, I don't know about this guy, but I kept telling myself it was all in my imagination. A few days later, the three of us made plans to see the new Spider-Man movie that had just come out. As I was getting ready, I got a call from Glenn informing me that Jaina had given him my address and that he would be going to come over to walk to our university campus where Jaina still lived. I got the bad vibe again, thinking I don't want him hanging out with me or walking with me. So I said, "Oh no, don't do that. It will be much easier to go separately and just meet at Jaina's." "No, I'm walking you." Okay, that was a tad alarming, but I knew he wouldn't relent, and that we would be walking the 30 minutes to campus together whether I liked it or not. When the movie ended, Glenn invited us to hang out and drink at his place where we could stay the night. He lived a good way away from where Jaina and I did, so staying the night did make sense. I felt uneasy but thought to myself, no, it'll be fine. Jaina will be with me. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. For some insane reason, he felt a good way to impress me was by showing me how much he could drink, because that's what everyone can look for in a partner, which was much less than he thought, and soon he was horrendously drunk. And that, my friends, is where it all hit the fan. He turned into a complete ogre, started punching out lights, and tearing his clothes to shreds in a drunken rage before returning to the bathroom to vomit loudly. When he came out, Jaina got up to use the bathroom next. I begged her not to go, or at least let me go in with her so I wouldn't be alone with him, but she said no and left me to fend for myself. That's when Glenn grabbed me and started making out with me, shoving his tongue down my throat. Did I mention he'd just puked his guts out? And even had a little bit of vomit on his shirt still. I began pushing him away, which was difficult as he was much taller, stronger, and heavier than I. This, of course, angered him, and he started breaking things again. That's when I got a text from Jaina saying, "We should go, he's absolutely pathetic like this," and I immediately called for a cab. We informed Glenn that we were leaving, and that incensed him even more. Yeah, well, I'm not gonna let you leave. That's when we ran out the door to the street. Luckily, he didn't chase after us, and our cab got there soon. We were dropped off at Jaina's residence building where we lamented the night as I pulled a sliver of broken light bulb from my foot. Now, a word about Jaina. She, like me, has too suffered years of abuse and trauma that manifested itself in horrific taste in men whom she'd be completely subservient to. That I knew, but what she told me next shocked me even more. Her and Glenn were actually casually hooking up and had been for a while. He took her home that night after the bar, and as he was literally climbing into bed with her, he told her how much he wanted to have me and wanted her to help him. But remember what I said about the fact that he liked that I was into video games, movies, and comics? That also meant that I pinged on his gaydar and said to her that if she, as in me, doesn't sleep with him, then I was a lesbian. Now that's some next level stuff right there. The next day I got a text from Glenn. A little birdie told me you're not very happy with me. That bird is right, I replied. Yeah, I'm sorry I acted that way. Would you be interested in playing mini-golf sometime? I couldn't believe the nerve of him. A half-assed apology over such horrific behavior that he was barely acknowledging, and then asking to hang out again? I knew that it was insanity, but beaten down, spineless little me still thought maybe I should give him a partial second chance. Maybe, but if you think I will ever do anything remotely sexual with you, you're out your mind. What? Of course not. In fact, I'm offended you even thought those were my intentions. Yeah, no, I'm out. Unfortunately, he also knew the store that I worked at and came to my checkout aisle a few times, once to buy a replacement for the shirt he ripped apart, and would try to strike up a casual conversation with me before suggesting we go somewhere together. I'd treat him as coldly as possible and give him a very definite decline. He seemed to have finally given up, as he stopped coming by, much to my relief. But that wasn't quite the end. A few weeks went by when I received a furious text from Glenn. Oh, so what, you're not even talking to me anymore? I couldn't believe it. After everything he'd done and said, he thinks I'm a horrible person for doing all of this? How could someone be so self-centered and deluded? I told him, of course, I'm not talking to him anymore, and that he's beyond abusive, unhinged, and thinks he can have whatever he wants, and I made it very clear I never wanted to see him again and to just leave me alone. He never replied, but rather than make me feel better, I was growing increasingly paranoid if it meant he had truly given up, or because he was planning an attack. Luckily, my roommate and our best friend were big burly guys, and made sure to escort me around because he knew where I lived and where I worked. And I'm happy to say that text message really was the last I ever heard from him. I don't wish him ill. I hope he gets the help he needs. But in any case, I'd rather never meet again. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's collection of stories. If of course you did, you can let me know in the usual way. It will be very much appreciated. If there is a story that you wish to share, you can send it to my email or my Reddit page. And I would like to extend a huge thank you to my members and patrons who continue to support me financially, and their names are on screen. It means the world, so thank you guys. But for now, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.